My tenant wants me to sell my house to pay for her daughter's education. But when I refused, my name is David, and I'm 34 years old. Today, I own a row of houses in my hometown in Ohio, something I never imagined would be possible growing up. My success didn't come easy. It's the result of years of hard work, smart financial decisions, and countless sacrifices along the way. I was raised in a poor, working-class family. My parents worked tirelessly to provide for me and my siblings. My father was a factory worker, and my mother cleaned houses. They did everything they could to make ends meet, but money was always tight. We didn't have much, but my parents instilled in us a strong work ethic and the belief that with hard work, anything was possible. My parents always dreamed of owning their own home, but for them, it was an unreachable goal. Watching them struggle lit a fire in me. I promised myself that one day I would build a better life, not just for me, but for my future family. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. In college, I met my wife, Sarah. We instantly connected because her story was similar to mine. Sarah was raised by a single mother who juggled multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Like me, Sarah understood the value of financial literacy and the importance of saving for the future. We shared the same dream, to break free from financial struggles and build a stable, comfortable life. After college, while many of our friends were spending their first paychecks on vacations and new cars, Sarah and I took a different path. We scraped together every dollar we could and bought our first small, rundown house in a rough neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We spent every weekend fixing it up, painting walls, repairing floors, and making it livable. When we finally sold it for a small profit, we reinvested the money into another property. It became our routine. Buy, fix, sell. We lived frugally, sacrificing luxuries and vacations to save money for the next investment. There were nights when we ate ramen noodles because every spare dollar went into home repairs or savings. But we didn't complain. Every home we bought and renovated was a step closer to financial freedom. Years of hard work started to pay off. Slowly but surely, we expanded from one house to 2, then 3, and eventually we owned an entire row of rental properties. Each home represented not just income but years of sweat, sacrifice, and relentless effort. These properties weren't just buildings, they were symbols of how far we had come. Today, Sarah and I are proud parents of 2 amazing kids, a son and a daughter. Owning these properties isn't just about financial security for us. It's about giving our children the life we never had. We can now provide them with opportunities our parents could only dream of. Our homes are more than a source of income. They are the foundation of our family's future. Looking back, I'm proud of how far we've come. But I never expected that one of these houses, a home I worked so hard to own, would become the center of a conflict that threatened everything I had built. And it all started with a tenant named Emily. A few years ago, I rented out one of my houses to a woman named Emily. She was in her late 30s at the time, a single mother raising her daughter, Lily. Emily's situation wasn't easy. Her husband had walked out on her shortly after Lily was born, leaving her to navigate life on her own. When she first applied to rent the house, I could tell she was struggling, and I saw a lot of my own mother in her. She was trying her best to provide for her child with limited resources. The house Emily rented was a cozy 3-bedroom home in a nice, quiet neighborhood. It wasn't the most expensive property I owned, but it was in a good school district, and I knew it would be the perfect place for a single mother raising a child. When I learned more about Emily's financial situation, I decided to offer her a reduced rent. It wasn't a business-savvy decision, but it felt like the right thing to do. I wanted Emily and Lily to have a safe, stable home. Over the years, Emily proved to be a reliable tenant. She always paid her rent on time, and whenever something needed fixing around the house, I was happy to help. Our relationship remained strictly professional but friendly. We would exchange small talk whenever I stopped by for maintenance, and I often asked about Lily, who was growing into a bright, ambitious young woman. Emily would often express how grateful she was for the affordable rent and the comfortable home. Things started to change about 3 months ago. Emily invited me over one afternoon, saying she wanted to discuss something important. I assumed she needed repairs or wanted to talk about the lease. When I arrived, she greeted me politely and invited me into the living room. She started the conversation by thanking me for all the help I had given her over the years. But as the conversation went on, I could sense a shift in her tone. She told me that Lily had been accepted into a prestigious out-of-state university. It was a huge achievement, and I genuinely congratulated her. But as Emily kept talking, it became clear that there was a bigger issue. The university's tuition was incredibly expensive, and the scholarship Lily had received barely covered 10% of the total cost. Emily explained that she had been working extra shifts, applied for financial aid, and even looked into student loans, but it still wasn't enough. I nodded along, thinking she might ask for a brief rent reduction or maybe to skip a month's payment. I would have understood that, but what Emily said next completely blindsided me. She asked me to sell the house she was living in and give her the money. At first, I thought I had misunderstood her. I chuckled awkwardly and asked her to repeat herself. But Emily was dead serious. She calmly explained that the property I rented to her was valuable and that selling it could easily cover Lily's tuition and living expenses. She even told me that she had the house appraised and was confident that the sale would solve all her financial problems. I was stunned. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "You want me to sell my house so you can pay for your daughter's college?" Emily's eyes were pleading. She insisted that this was Lily's only chance to secure a bright future. She told me that, as a parent, I should understand the lengths she was willing to go to for her child. She even suggested that I could lend her the money, and Lily would pay it back after graduating. I was speechless. I took a deep breath and tried to explain to Emily why her request was completely unreasonable. I told her that this property wasn't just a house. It was part of the foundation of my family's future. I had worked for years to acquire these properties so I could provide stability for my own children. Selling a house just to fund someone else's child's education was out of the question. I also reminded her that owning and renting out properties was my primary source of income. I wasn't a massive corporation with endless resources. I was a man who had worked hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to throw it all away. Emily didn't take my answer well. She argued that I was being selfish and heartless. She claimed that I had more than enough money and that selling one house wouldn't affect me. I calmly told her that I sympathized with her situation, but it wasn't my responsibility to fund her daughter's education. I suggested she reach out to family, look for more scholarships, or consider more affordable universities. But Emily wasn't interested in any of that. She was convinced that selling my property was the only solution. I firmly told her that this conversation was over and asked her not to bring it up again. I left that day thinking it was done, that Emily would come to her senses and understand how absurd her request was. But I was wrong. That conversation was just the beginning of a conflict that would spiral far beyond anything I could have imagined. That I thought that after our uncomfortable conversation, Emily would eventually come to her senses and move on. I believed she would realize how absurd her request was and continue to live peacefully in the home I had generously rented to her for years. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. Not long after I refused to sell the house, Emily began to change. She stopped greeting me when we crossed paths. The once friendly conversations were replaced by cold stares and short, dismissive responses. But what truly shocked me was that Emily suddenly stopped paying rent altogether. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe she forgot or something had gone wrong with her bank account. I politely reminded her about the missed payment, but she brushed me off, saying she was handling it. But a second month went by, and there was still no payment. When I confronted her again, Emily didn't make excuses this time. She told me outright that she wasn't going to pay rent until I agreed to sell the house. Her tone was cold and unapologetic. "I've lived here for years," she said firmly. "You owe me this much. Lily's future is more important than your money." I was stunned. Emily had gone from being a grateful tenant to someone who felt entitled to my property. I calmly reminded her that we had a signed lease agreement and that refusing to pay rent was a violation of that contract. I warned her that if she continued to withhold payment, I would be forced to take legal action. She didn't care. The tension between us grew worse. What had once been a friendly landlord-tenant relationship had completely fallen apart. Emily no longer spoke to me unless it was to hurl accusations or repeat her demands. She seemed to believe that I was the villain in this story for refusing to sacrifice my property for her daughter's education. But things didn't stop there. Emily wasn't content with just ignoring rent or making personal demands. She began to escalate the situation in ways I hadn't expected. It started subtly. I noticed that some of my neighbors, people who had been friendly for years, were suddenly distant. I'd wave hello, and they would awkwardly look away. Conversations would abruptly end when I walked into the room. Then I heard the rumors. Emily had started telling neighbors that I was a greedy landlord who refused to help a struggling single mother. She told them that I was wealthy and heartless, choosing profit over compassion. She painted a picture of herself as a victim, a mother who was doing everything possible to give her daughter a better future, only to be blocked by a selfish landlord who wouldn't lift a finger to help. First, I brushed it off. I figured the people who knew me would never believe such lies. But Emily wasn't done. She took her story to social media. Emily made long, emotional posts on Facebook and local community groups, sharing details of her struggles as a single mother and how her rich landlord refused to help her daughter go to college. She didn't name me directly, but it wasn't hard for people to figure out who she was talking about. She even posted pictures of Lily, emphasizing how hardworking and deserving she was of a better future. The posts quickly gained traction. Neighbors, friends of Emily, and even strangers chimed in, expressing sympathy and outrage. Comments flooded in. How could a landlord be so heartless? He has multiple houses. Selling one wouldn't hurt him. People like him don't understand how hard it is to be a single mom. It didn't take long for those online accusations to spill into real life. Neighbors who once smiled at me now looked at me with judgment. People I barely knew whispered as I walked by. I even overheard someone call me greedy while grocery shopping. What hurt the most was how this began to affect my family. My son came home from school one day upset because some of his classmates had started teasing him, repeating things their parents must have said. They called me a slumlord and claimed I was trying to kick out a family for money. That was my breaking point. Emily's lies weren't just damaging my reputation. They were harming my family. I realized I couldn't let this continue. I had tried to handle things quietly, but Emily was relentless. She was willing to ruin my name and hurt my family just to get what she wanted. I knew it was time to take action. What began as a personal disagreement quickly spiraled into a full-blown public attack. Emily wasn't satisfied with my refusal to sell her the house. She wanted to destroy my reputation. Her social media posts became more frequent and more aggressive. Emily portrayed herself as a struggling single mother, desperate to give her daughter Lily a brighter future. I, on the other hand, was cast as the greedy, heartless landlord who refused to help. She wrote emotional posts about how I was the only obstacle standing between Lily and her dream of going to college. She shared pictures of Lily studying late at night, pleading with the community to understand their struggle. Emily never used my name, but in a small town like ours, it didn't take long for people to figure out she was talking about me. Her posts spread rapidly in local Facebook groups. Comments flooded in from people who didn't even know me. How can a landlord be this selfish? He owns several properties. Selling one wouldn't hurt him. People like him make life harder for families. The backlash was immediate. Neighbors I had known for years started acting differently. They avoided eye contact. Conversations would stop when I walked by. Friends I thought I could count on grew distant. But the most painful part wasn't how people treated me. It was how it affected my family. My son Jacob came home from school one day quieter than usual. I asked him what was wrong, and after some hesitation, he admitted that some kids were talking about me. They said you're kicking out a family because you're greedy, he muttered. My heart sank. Mia, my younger daughter, told us that her friends' parents didn't want their kids coming over to our house anymore. One girl even told Mia that her parents said I was a bad man. It was devastating. I had spent years working hard to build a safe and stable life for my family. Now, because of Emily's lies, my children were being bullied and isolated. Sarah, my wife, tried to stay strong, but I could see the stress weighing on her. She stopped going to community events. The judgmental stares and whispers were too much. The community was divided. Some believed Emily's story completely. They viewed me as a heartless landlord hoarding wealth while a struggling mother begged for help. They shared Emily's posts, voiced outrage online, and even discussed organizing protests against my rental properties. Others, especially those who knew me well, quietly supported me. They understood how hard I had worked to build what I had. But they were afraid to speak up, worried that Emily's supporters might turn on them next. The division in the community was obvious. People were choosing sides, and my family was suffering. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat in silence. "This can't go on," she whispered. "Our kids are being bullied. Our neighbors hate us. What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath. "I'm calling a lawyer." Sarah looked up, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Emily's crossed a line. This isn't gossip anymore. This is defamation." The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. We started collecting evidence, screenshots of Emily's posts, comments from local groups, and reports from the school about the bullying. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case. Spreading false information that damages someone's reputation is illegal. We drafted a cease and desist letter demanding Emily take down her posts and stop spreading lies. If she refused, we would sue for defamation. Emily didn't back down. She went online again, claiming I was silencing a struggling mother and using my wealth to intimidate her. But I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protecting my family and my reputation. Emily thought I would stay silent. She was wrong. The moment Emily's lies started harming my family, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. It was time to fight back. I contacted my lawyer, Mark Reynolds, an experienced attorney specializing in defamation and property disputes. After hearing everything Emily had done, Mark immediately confirmed that her actions were legally actionable. "She's defaming you, David," he said. "Her false accusations have damaged your reputation and hurt your family. We have a strong case." Mark quickly drafted a cease and desist letter, demanding Emily stop spreading lies and remove her defamatory social media posts. If she refused, we would file a defamation lawsuit. Predictably, Emily ignored the letter and escalated her attacks. She painted me as a wealthy landlord trying to intimidate a struggling single mother. Her supporters rallied behind her, believing every word. But while Emily was ranting online, Mark and I built an airtight case. We collected screenshots of every defamatory post Emily had made and gathered comments from people who believed her lies. Several neighbors agreed to testify that Emily's accusations were false and baseless. We also obtained detailed records of Emily's rent payments, proving she had been paying a reduced rate for years, completely contradicting her claims of exploitation. Additionally, we compiled text messages between Emily and me, where I had politely declined her request to sell the house. These messages clearly showed that I had treated her professionally and respectfully throughout. We even gathered reports from the school documenting the bullying my children endured as a result of Emily's slander. This evidence demonstrated the real harm her lies had caused. The first court hearing arrived, and I was nervous but determined. Emily entered the courtroom with her lawyer, exuding false confidence. Her defense was predictable. She claimed everything she posted was just her opinion and protected by free speech. But Mark was prepared. He calmly explained that free speech doesn't protect false statements presented as facts, especially when they damage someone's reputation. Mark presented Emily's social media posts and highlighted how her lies had led to bullying at my children's school and harm to my business. Emily's lawyer tried to frame me as a heartless landlord picking on a vulnerable mother, but Mark countered this by presenting rent records, proving Emily had been given a discounted rate. Witnesses, including neighbors and other tenants, testified that I had always been fair and helpful. The most damaging evidence came when Mark revealed text messages where I had respectfully declined Emily's request to sell the house. It was undeniable proof that I had done nothing wrong. Emily's narrative began to crumble. In his closing statement, Mark was direct. Emily Foster deliberately spread false statements about my client, David Parker, causing harm to his business and family. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated attempt to manipulate public opinion for personal gain. Emily avoided eye contact with me as we left the courtroom. She knew things weren't going her way. For the first time in months, I felt relief. The truth was finally being heard. The legal battle wasn't over yet, but I was ready to fight until the very end. Weeks passed in tense anticipation. The courtroom hearings had been exhausting, but I held on to the hope that the truth would prevail. The evidence was overwhelming, yet I couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at me. Emily had done everything in her power to ruin my reputation, and I knew that only a decisive legal victory could restore what she had damaged. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. I sat beside my lawyer, Mark Reynolds, in the courtroom, my palms sweating despite the cool air. Sarah was there too, holding my hand tightly. Across the room, Emily sat with her lawyer, looking pale and nervous. Her confident facade had cracked long ago. She avoided making eye contact with me. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. After weeks of hearings, mountains of evidence, and emotional testimonies, it all came down to this moment. The judge began to speak, carefully reviewing the facts of the case. He acknowledged the extensive evidence presented: Emily's defamatory social media posts, the proof of my fair treatment as a landlord, and the testimonies from neighbors and other tenants. He recognized the bullying my children had endured as a direct result of Emily's false claims. Then, the words I had been waiting for: this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, David Parker. The defendant, Emily Foster, is hereby found guilty of defamation. I felt like I could finally breathe again. A wave of relief washed over me. Sarah squeezed my hand, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The judge wasn't done. The defendant is ordered to pay damages to Mr. Parker for harm to his reputation and emotional distress. Additionally, Ms. Foster is required to pay all overdue rent and legal fees incurred by the plaintiff. Furthermore, the defendant must immediately remove all defamatory content related to Mr. Parker from all social media platforms. Emily's lawyer looked defeated. Emily stared straight ahead, frozen. The weight of the consequences finally seemed to sink in. Outside the courtroom, I finally allowed myself to relax. Mark patted me on the back, offering a rare smile. "You earned this, David. You fought back and won." Sarah hugged me tightly. "It's over." I nodded, though part of me still couldn't believe it. Emily had spent months trying to destroy me, but now justice had been served. In the following days, Emily was forced to delete all of her damaging posts. Every slanderous comment, every manipulative story, gone. The court order was clear, and failure to comply would result in further legal consequences. Emily also had to cover the rent she withheld for months, along with additional fines and my legal fees. The financial hit was significant, but it was her public humiliation that seemed to hurt her most. The community saw the truth. The same people who had once whispered behind my back now knew the full story. Neighbors who had distanced themselves began reaching out with quiet apologies. Some even admitted they regretted believing Emily's lies. But it wasn't about public approval anymore. For me, it was about reclaiming peace for my family. Most importantly, my family could finally breathe again. Jacob and Mia returned to school without the weight of their classmates' cruel words. The bullying stopped. The teachers and school administration were supportive, and the kids slowly began to feel safe again. Sarah seemed lighter too. The stress that had consumed her for months lifted. We could finally go out in public without feeling the weight of judgment. Our home felt safe again. I didn't feel anger toward Emily anymore, just pity. Her desperate attempt to manipulate and control had backfired. Her lies had led to her own downfall. Looking back, I was proud of how I handled everything. I didn't stoop to her level. I fought with facts, patience, and the law on my side. Justice had been served, and now it was time to move forward. Free from the shadows Emily had cast over our lives, my family and I could finally focus on what mattered most: each other. The final chapter of this exhausting ordeal began with Emily's eviction. According to the court ruling, Emily was required to vacate the property within 30 days. Despite all the damage she had caused, I chose to give her the full time allowed by law rather than pushing for an immediate eviction. I didn't want to make things any harder for her daughter, Lily. When the moving day finally arrived, I stayed away from the property. I didn't want any more confrontations. Emily left quietly without any drama. There were no parting words, no attempts to justify her actions. She simply packed up and disappeared from our lives. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of finality. Emily was gone. The house she once occupied now stood empty, and with it, the storm that had consumed my family finally passed. A few days after Emily moved out, something unexpected happened. Lily reached out to me. She sent me a message on Facebook, and for a moment, I debated whether I should even open it. But curiosity got the best of me. Her message was short but sincere. Mr. Parker, I'm so sorry for everything my mom did. I never wanted any of this. I understand if you hate me, but I wanted to say thank you for letting us live there for so long. I'm sorry for the trouble she caused you and your family. Reading her words stirred something in me. I never blamed Lily for her mother's actions. She was just a kid caught in the middle of a situation she didn't create. I could sense the genuine regret in her message. I responded simply but honestly, Lily, I don't hate you. I hope you focus on your future and move forward from this. Take care of yourself. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lily didn't respond after that, and I didn't expect her to. But it felt good to close that chapter on a note of understanding. Life slowly began to return to normal. Jacob and Mia were finally able to go back to school without the weight of bullying. The same classmates who once teased them moved on, and the school staff, now aware of what had happened, took steps to ensure it wouldn't happen again. The laughter returned to our home, and for the first time in months, our house felt like a safe haven again. Sarah and I reconnected with neighbors who had distanced themselves. Some offered quiet apologies, admitting they had believed Emily's lies without knowing the full story. I didn't hold any grudges. People are quick to believe a compelling story, and Emily had been convincing. I also took time to repair the house Emily had left behind. It was more than just a property. It symbolized the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of a fresh start. I renovated it, repainted the walls, and fixed small damages. Eventually, I rented it to a young couple starting their own family. This time, I felt confident they would bring life back to the house without any drama. Through all of this, I learned valuable lessons. I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it feels like the world is against you, is worth it. I learned that no matter how much good you do, some people will still find ways to twist it. But most importantly, I learned the importance of protecting what you've built and the people you love. Emily's lies could have destroyed me, but they didn't. The truth won in the end. Our family started spending more time together. We went on weekend trips, enjoyed family dinners without the looming tension, and simply appreciated the peace we had fought so hard to regain. Sarah and I often talked about how this experience, as painful as it was, made us stronger as a family. We faced the worst and came out on the other side more united than ever. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah leaned into me and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I smiled. "I'm proud of us." And I meant it. We had weathered the storm and rebuilt what mattered most. Our peace, our trust, and our family. That chapter was closed. For good.